What has Israel achieved through the war?
Well, first things first, Yama, it's important to understand that this was not a war we wanted. This war shocked us. Almost everyone here knows someone that was killed on October the 7th. It shook our very sense of security. Our war aims are the same as on day one. They are, of course, to defeat Hamas, to make sure that they cannot exist anymore politically, militarily, to bring back our hostages, and also to ensure that Gaza can never be a threat, not only to Israel, but to the civilized world as well. So those are our war aims.
You said, as you said, your government set 3 goals: destroy Hamas, return the hostages, and give the Israelis their sense of security back. But you've failed to deliver on all these promises. Why is that, do you think?
So I would challenge that wholeheartedly. Militarily, the particulars are quite interesting. We think there are 24 battalions of Hamas. We think we've destroyed at least 18 or 19 of those military battalions. There are still 4 in Rafah.
You claim that you've destroyed 18 Hamas battalions. What is the proof of that?
So the proof is from the battlefield itself. We know the number of Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists that we've killed. We know we've killed at least 13,000 terrorists, armed terrorists. I remind you again.
How do you know that you've killed 13,000 terrorists?
Because they were firing at us.
So did you do a head count?
Yes.
So this is a verifiable fact according to you?
I don't say that we have their lists, I don't say we have their names, but we have killed 13,000 combatants.
Yes, but it's just a number, Mr. Mencer. It's just a number. We have never seen any concrete proof that backs up this number.
So I'm a spokesman for this government. I'm a spokesman for this government and the Israeli people. And I'll tell you right now that we have killed 13,000 terrorists. We have executed the gold standard when it comes to firing and directing our war at the terrorists and getting civilians out of harm's way. We have no problem with the people of Gaza. We want them to have a better future, but we need to get rid of this genocidal, murderous organizations, and that is what we are doing.
You say you've set the gold standard. Your critics would say Israel is waging a genocidal war, according to UN experts. Israel finds itself in the docks in the International Criminal Court of Justice, which says there is plausible reason to believe genocide is being committed in Gaza. The EU says Israel is using starvation as a weapon against 2.2 million Gazans. It doesn't really sound like a gold standard.
So let me take those apart, because there's a lot in that question which you just asked. On genocide, I would point you to the fact that a genocide was committed against my people, indiscriminate killing against my people. You know, we, the Jewish people, we recognize evil when we see it. We've been very, very clear that it's a terrible war, it's a dangerous war. We've lost 606 of our soldiers in this war. But this country is united on its war aims, and we will be successful because, you know, we don't have anywhere else to go in this country. You know, there is only one Jewish state in the entire world.
Explain to us why you're bent on moving into Rafah with your forces.
So the first things first on this question of Rafah, we move civilians out of harm's way. That's very, very important to us. In all of the battles which we fought, and they have been, it's an extremely complex military environment, extremely complex, because it is an urban, it's not a regular battlefield, it is an urban environment where Hamas fire at us from hospitals, from schools, from mosques.
There are 1.4 million people in Rafah.
We believe there are about 1 million, and I think our figures are probably
that's
more
a lot
trustworthy.
still.
It is.
A lot of people,
and
a military offensive.
We encourage them to go there, to get out of harm's way.
Exactly, that's why they're there. But a military offensive into Rafah will end in a slaughter, the UN warns. Tell us, how are you going to evacuate all these people?
In the same way that we've done in the past.
That didn't work very well. You told people to move to what was a safe zone, then your forces would end up bombing that area. Are you going to follow the same formula?
So again, I think that's a misrepresentation of this war. We're after Hamas. We've got no problem with ordinary Gazans. I won't be sharing with you our battle plans. They're being discussed Right now...
I'm not asking about the battle plan, Mr. Mencer.
So
I'm
you
asking
just have
how
to look-
are you going to evacuate 1.4 million people out of Rafah?
We will do the same as we've done in other parts of this harsh military war. We move people out of harm's way. We've already acquired, there's been multiple reports of shelters which have been acquired, safe zones where people can move to.
We've also seen people with white flags in plain sight being shot by your forces. We've also seen people in so-called safe zones being bombed. So we've seen your forces kill people on the run from your bombs as well over the past 6 months.
So again, I would say to you that we feel we are the most humane army which has ever existed in living memory. We've done more to protect civilian lives. Where there have been, Yama, this is important. Let me share with you.
You even shot your own hostages.
Right.
That came
so
out
where
running
there have
alive,
been
waved flags, and your soldiers
an extremely terrible occurrence that was.
So how are people in
where
Gaza
we have
supposed to
made
feel
mistakes?
Safe? How are they supposed
where
to
we
feel
have
safe?
made mistakes, we investigate, we wait for those results, and we adjust our behavior accordingly. That's what democracies do.
Does Israel abide by international law?
Yes.
A UN Security Council resolution passed more than 4 weeks ago demanded a ceasefire. It demanded a stop to the war. Such a resolution is legally binding for all UN members, yet your forces continue to bomb Gaza. Isn't that a clear breach of international law?
So the Americans made clear that it wasn't legally binding, and with all the legal cases you can get a number of opinions, but they make sure that it wasn't legally binding.
Why doesn't Israel respect the UN Security Council resolution ordering you to cease fire? You know that the only way Israel managed to release around 100 hostages was through negotiations, which paved the way for a ceasefire back in December. Yet you're continuing the war. Why?
We're not dealing with Norway here. We're not dealing with Scandinavia. We're dealing with a genocidal, murderous organization. We would love to be able to settle all of our differences around the negotiating table, but again and again and again, Hamas keep walking away. And you know, this war could end this afternoon, before the sun goes down behind me. This war could end right now if Hamas did two things: laid down their arms and released our hostages.
More than 34,000 people have been killed in Gaza, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. Your government rejects these figures. Why?
Would you take the figures of Al-Qaeda at face value?
But the UN and WHO says the figures from the Gaza Health Ministry, Hamas's health ministry, are reliable, that they even passed international scrutiny in previous wars. In fact, if you look up the numbers, in the wars in 2014 and 2021, Israel's and Hamas's casualty numbers were almost identical. Why would suddenly they lie in this current crisis and war?
The health ministry does not differentiate between a civilian combatant, which is a tragedy, we say that very, very clearly, and a terrorist. We do. We do.
The UN says these numbers coming from the Hamas Health Ministry are reliable. There's no reason to doubt them, because several times this health ministry during this war has published long lists of names where you have the ID number, their names. Detailed lists have been published documenting who has been killed inside the Gaza Strip during this war. You claim you've killed 13,000 Hamas fighters, yet you haven't produced any lists whatsoever. No documentation. It's a number you're giving the world.
It's a number which our army has given to us in a democratic country with checks and balances, with media scrutiny, with all the Western values that Norway holds dear or should hold dear.
Well, Mr. Mencer, I ask you again, where is the concrete proof that you've killed 13,000 fighters? Okay, you claim it, but where is the proof? At least Hamas's health ministry has published lists confirming who has died several times.
I wouldn't take Hamas's word for anything, literally anything.
So we shouldn't believe Hamas, we shouldn't believe the UN, the World Health Organizations, all the aid groups on the ground, rights groups from all over the world. We shouldn't believe them, we should believe the Israeli government.
You'll excuse me if I feel extremely skeptical about almost anything which comes out of the United Nations. We are a proud member of the United Nations. Our officials express our beliefs in the United Nations, and we defend ourselves as is the right thing to do. But all of us here in Israel feel extreme skepticism at the double standards which the UN constantly throws at us. We simply don't take their word for it. They're simply quoting Hamas. Hamas is a genocidal organization, and we simply can't, you wouldn't take ISIS' word for it, so why on earth would you take Hamas's word for it?
Let's move on to the attacks you've carried out against Gaza's hospitals. The UN says Gaza's health system has been completely destroyed by your forces. Why have you attacked most of the hospitals in Gaza?
Because there is almost not one hospital or medical institution that has not been used as a base for terror, as for weapons storage, with tunnels underneath. Hamas is a deadly terrorist organization, so they killed 1,200, more than 1,200 of my people on October the 7th, babies and beheadings and rapes and terrible, terrible things. So, I think we shouldn't take...
Have the beheadings, by the way, been proven?
Yes.
I haven't seen that proof. Can you explain it to us? Have the beheadings been proven?
Yes, they have been proven. You can go on, if you speak to the IDF spokesman, I'm not a spokesman for the IDF, but they will show you the evidence if you ask for it for those terrible crimes.
1 week into the war, your army spokesperson Daniel Hagari showed the world a virtual 3D model of an alleged Hamas command and control center which stretched several stories beneath the largest medical facility in Gaza, the Shifa hospital, which you know very well of. Why haven't you shown any proof of such a command center?
Again, Yama, this line of questioning really shocks us here in Israel, because we've shown the world media, many journalists have been taken to those tunnels. We've seen those bulletproof doors. We've seen the cells, terror dungeon
specifically with
network.
Shifa Hospital, what you've shown the world are abandoned tunnels and shafts and weapons your forces claim were found inside the hospital. That does not prove that Hamas had a 3-story underground command and control center under the Shifa, a claim Israel has used to justify the attacks on hospitals all over the Gaza Strip.
I'm quite disappointed at this line of questioning, and it's not just from you, because we face this unreasonable burden of proof of the horrors of Hamas strategies. We've shown you tunnels.
Hamas has never denied they had tunnels under Gaza. That's an open secret. But you're claiming that they had a command center under the biggest hospital in Gaza. You use that as an argument to lay that hospital in ruins, and that's why it's a question the international press has to ask you. Where is this command center under the Shifa hospital?
Asking questions is, of course, the right thing to do for any journalist, but we have produced evidence of terror tunnels underneath the hospital. I apologize, Yama, if it's not enough for you. I apologize for the fact that we found RPGs in an intensive care unit. I apologize for the fact that we were fired on from the maternity ward. And I can tell you one thing, it wasn't the midwives that were firing at us. The evidence is clearly there. Journalists have been taken there. There is a terror tunnel network twice the size of the London Underground.
You've said it time and again, you find the line of questioning regarding the attacks on the hospitals and questioning these tunnels offensive.
I don't find it offensive, I find it ridiculous, to be
ridiculous.
For an intelligent person like you, Yama,
but why
it's ridiculous. What else do you need to see? You've seen videos.
Listen,
Hamas admit it. We're fired from there. The terrorists are there. We killed 200 there. The doctors, we move the doctors and the patients out of the way. I don't know. It's a ridiculous line of questioning. I'm not shocked by it. I find it ridiculous.
But why don't you open Gaza for international press who can freely move around and check these tunnels for themselves? Because what you've done until now in this war, you've sealed the borders. No journalists, independent journalists, are allowed into Gaza by your forces and by Egypt. The journalists you're talking about who are allowed in are handpicked by the IDF. They go on so-called embeds, where the IDF forces decide where they go, where they move, where they film, and who they talk to. That's hardly the standard of free press.
So Yama, we have taken in many, many journalists, critical journalists, critical journalists as well. We have taken in many, many journalists on the point.
On guided tours,
Right.
Mr. Mencer, that's different. That's not how free press should operate. We should have the ability, the possibility to move around freely, to check and verify things for ourselves. That's our job, especially in a war.
So
You're not allowing us to do our job.
Yama, you've put this accusation to me. Let me give you Israeli government response.
It's not an accusation, it's a fact. You do not allow independent
You've
journalists
put these points
to the Gaza
me.
Strip.
You've put these points to me. Allow me to reply. Number one, this is a war zone, an active war zone, not a normal war zone, not like in other countries in the past. This is perhaps an unprecedented war zone in human history, where
so is Ukraine and Russia,
where
but
they
journalists
are fighting,
allowed all the way to the front
Allow
line.
me to reply. You've asked me a question. Please do me the courtesy of allowing me to reply. So it's an active war zone. We have hostages in Gaza. We know there are still 133 of our people. Unfortunately, 36 of them have been killed. We know that our hostages are there as well. We fear for their presence as well. And we know that our armed forces would be jeopardized. They would be jeopardized, and we will always put the lives of our armed forces ahead of any sort of journalists wanting to go in.
Your critics say that you're denying access to journalists who can operate independently inside Gaza because you don't want the world to see what you're doing inside Gaza. How do you respond to that?
So the news, practically, let's talk about practically rather than your personal hurt feelings. Practically, the news is getting out of Gaza. There are many, many Palestinian journalists reporting from Gaza, which is their absolute right to tell you what they're...
100 of them have also been killed in this war.
And we also
unprecedented
know,
number.
and we also know, Yama, that many of these journalists call themselves journalists, but being active Hamas operatives.
And you presented proof of this claim?
Yes, we have. We have presented proof to the world's media of Al Jazeera's, the head of Al Jazeera, his children, unfortunately, who we had to target, were Hamas operatives. So let's not paint this as some sort of pure, Norwegian type environment.
Recently, an independent inquiry concluded that Israel has not produced a shred of evidence backing up their claim. Since January, your government has been claiming that UNRWA supports Hamas, that a number of UNRWA employees took active part in the October 7th attacks. If you make that claim, why don't you present the evidence to this independent inquiry?
So Yama, just today at a press conference at 3:30, I presented just that evidence.
Why didn't you give it to the UN investigators?
That's precisely what we did.
When they concluded?
And if you ask...
But they've been asking for evidence for weeks.
So that is another slur, a long list of many slurs against this country. We cooperated wholeheartedly with this investigation, but unfortunately it is a whitewash. This investigation, unfortunately, hasn't been independent and is another proof point of why this organization, UNRWA, cannot be reformed.
The international community is not buying what Israeli government is saying. Most of the donor countries which cut aid to UNRWA based on the claims you made against them that they took part in the Hamas attack on October 7th, most of them have reinstated the aid. Even the Germans, even they decided this week that they would reinstate the aid going to UNRWA. So nobody seemed to believe your proof.
So that's something that we are upset about. I'll be frank with you. The Israeli government has produced multiple evidence of the widespread hand-in-hand relationship between UNRWA and Hamas. You know, there was a Hamas server farm right underneath UNRWA's headquarters. I mean, it's almost farcical to believe there isn't a connection. It wasn't a few bad apples. This was a whole rotten orchard.
Internationally, it's seen as Israel has a lot of trust issues. Israel claims Like you've said, 13,000 Hamas operatives have been killed. Hospitals have been used as Hamas controlling command bases. UN aid workers, UNRWA workers took part in terror attacks. Why should the world believe your side of the story when you keep pushing unfounded claims?
Yama, we have produced all the evidence that you've talked about, but unfortunately it's never enough. It's never enough for people that do not wish to see the truth or believe the truth because they have some sort of vested interest, or they believe intrinsically that Israel is in some way guilty.
Almost 7 months into the war, nobody seems to understand what Israel's post-war plan for Gaza is. What will happen to Gaza after you're done with the war?
So once Hamas have been removed politically and militarily, Gaza needs to be rebuilt. A better future, a more hopeful future, needs to be allowed for their people. We need to do the same thing which happened in Germany at 1945, where the Allies magnanimously rebuilt Germany, which was destroyed by the Allies, and more importantly, de-radicalized it. They de-radicalized it.
You mentioned the Allies during the Second World War.
Yeah.
Is Israel going to rebuild Gaza? Because you bombed the place.
So unfortunately, this is not a war that we wanted or a war that we asked for.
Nor did the Allies ask for that war, but
Right.
they helped rebuild Germany. So my question is, the World Bank
Verifiable, because you say
estimates
so.
that your bombing has caused damages in Gaza to the tune of $18.2 billion. And my question is, will Israel pay for the reconstruction?
Nothing would make Israel happier, Israelis, I think to a person outside of this building, nothing would make Israel happier to have peaceful neighbors in Gaza, to have a Gaza which is prosperous, to have a Gaza which is allows for a better future for its children, a Gaza which is de-radicalized and is not constantly every 18 months waging war against us or firing rockets at us.
Mr. Mencer, you've made that point time and again during the interview. I had a very specific
Peace
question.
is important to us, Yama,
Yes,
okay?
but so is
It's
the
part of the
reconstruction
symbol.
of Gaza.
It's part of the
2.4
symbol.
million people who have lost their homes. I'm asking you, Israel bombed Gaza. Will you take the bill for the reconstruction?
So I don't have an answer to that question because I don't know the official answer, and I don't want to give you
So
an
who
incorrect
should pay
answer.
for the reconstruction of Gaza?
But
Who should
Gaza
pay for it?
should be rebuilt. We have in the past used our expertise, to rebuild Gaza in the past.
People listening to your answer, sir, would think that, okay, Israel is not committing to picking up the bill for the reconstruction of Gaza. Why should the international community pay for the destruction Israel caused in Gaza?
So once again, Yama, I don't have an answer to that question, and I don't want to make a commitment here on Norwegian TV. Much as it's an important channel, I can't give you a commitment to that answer because I simply don't know.
You've said time and again that your war is not against the Palestinian people. Your war is against Hamas. So if you rebuild their houses, wouldn't that be a very good gesture on the road to coexistence?
So Yama, this is the fourth time I think you've asked me this question, and I will give you the same answer. I'm happy to get an official response to that, but I cannot give a commitment to you this evening.
How does the Israeli government see the way forward?
So the Prime Minister has made clear within weeks this conflict could be over, which is why the Prime Minister said to President Biden, and he was quoting Winston Churchill, speaking to the Americans, a different American president, he said, "Give us the tools to finish the job. We're almost there. We will destroy, we'll obliterate this organization, and we want to get back to peace, to coexistence, to allowing Gazans and Israelis to have a better future."
David Mencer, thank you so much for joining us and giving us ample time to ask all our questions.
You're very welcome. Good to be with you.